Continuing in this section here on the Mama Hikarim, which is talking about the spiritual realm, we discussed that God's being viewed as the creator of course, not only the physical world and all of the myriad objects within it, but also the creator of the spiritual world with all of the myriad objects in it as well. And just as there are laws and limitations which govern the physical world, the same is true regarding the spiritual world. I'm just summarizing a bit. He said that of the different types of beings that there are in the spiritual world are included what he calls forces, what he calls souls, and what he calls angels. And you asked, what's the difference between, let's say, forces and angels? So forces are generally, we describe that forces are the energy that flows through the system of creation and influences creation in a general providential type of a way. So that, for example, if in Jewish mysticism you think about there being the essence of God as Ein Sof, and there being four worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, these four spiritual worlds through which the divine power of creation is manifested until it actually is expressed in the creation of the spiritual world and also the physical world. So then powers or forces would be those types of flows of energy which are responsible for kind of the providential guidance of the world. Those would be kochot. You could have positive or negative kochos. But that's all different than, for example, malachim, because malachim are much more specific, less general, but more specific. And we described how malachim, malach comes from the word malacha, which is a creative act. And therefore, in the true sense, a malach is not, in the true sense, a malach is like a pocket of divine energy, which is directed to do a specific act. Okay? But not to interact in the world in a general way. So that would be the primary difference between what he calls here kochos and malachim. A koyach would be any of the channels through which divine energy flows in order to be involved in, interact, and oversee the running of the world, either in a good sense or in a harmful sense. Whereas a malach is a specific malach. It's like a force of energy which is sent for a specific purpose. Okay, as opposed to a neshama, where a neshama is its own creation, which is the human soul. Okay.
So is the spiritual realm? It's still like a realm separate from God? Yes. So it's not like the afterlife is not like a perfect reunification with God. It is like a...
Well, it depends on where the afterlife is in the spiritual realm. When we're talking here about the spiritual realm, what I have in mind is the kind of matrix or infrastructure through which God translates itself into creation. But the souls in the afterlife will not be there. They'll be much closer to within the presence of God itself. The higher part of the spiritual realm. And the souls will be much higher to God, although they won't necessarily be inextricably bound. There won't be the same sense of being inextricably bound within God. There will still be some sense of being outside of God, yet nevertheless much more close to being unified with God. But still higher than the spiritual realm, higher than these olamos, higher than this structure of spiritual worlds, one above the other, which gradually spans the difference between the entirely physical and the realm of God. That realm is the realm through which the kochos flow. The malachim also traverse that realm as they are being sent as specific directives to do specific things within the tapestry of the general guiding of the world in the backdrop of the kochos. Okay, and souls can also, souls also have movement throughout those realms, but Gan Eden is even higher than them. That's what we're talking about, the afterlife. Now, what we saw most recent here is a parallel to beings in the spiritual world, which are demons. And last time we met, which is I think before some of you guys were here, we were elaborating on the teachings here regarding demons. And without going into too much detail at this point, we're going to go into a little bit more detail further on. But the idea that demons are spiritual creations Well, they're creations which are between the spiritual and the physical. In some way, they're like spiritual beings. In some way, they're like physical beings. And we elaborated yesterday on the ways in which they're similar to human beings and the ways in which they aren't. What we got up to yesterday was the idea that demons are actually created on a higher hierarchy, on a higher part of the hierarchy of creation than human beings are. Because generally creation went from low to high, from inanimate to animate. And then, meaning from non-living to living plant. Within living, you've got plants and animals. Within animals, you have animals and human beings. Within human beings, you have man and then woman. And then after the creation of man were demons, just before Shabbos came in. And the Midrash says that...
So does that mean that he knew that Adam would sin?
Why?
Because he created demons. Or the forces that were, this negative force, the Yitzhahara, right?
So we were discussing that demons, so that this is the point here, that it turns out according to this, that demons were not necessarily a negative force. And the Midrash says that God was in the midst of creating them when Shabbos came in. He wasn't able to complete it, so he had to stop. The Midrash compares that to a person who's walking along the way with a precious gem in his pocket. When Shabbos comes in, he's forced to discard it. So in the analogy, you see that the demons are compared to a gem, implying that they were like the crowning jewel of creation. So they're not necessarily negative.
So their job changed.
Yes, in a way, their job changed, unless God had intended that, and that would be one way of trying to make sense of the fact that God didn't manage to finish them before creation came. What does that mean? God's not limited. So maybe it was all intentional, but in any case, it certainly adds the dimension to demons that they're not just negative; they can also be positive, and that's where we left off yesterday. That some of the demons are actually referred to as righteous, others as Torah scholars, others are called men, right? Others are wicked, and others are like animal-like. So there's a whole spectrum of demons, and we were discussing some of the examples of good demons. There was a Yosef Shed, a demon named Yosef, who apparently gave Torah lectures during Talmudic times in Babylon. And he's described as going between two of the main Babylonian cities there, giving Torah lectures to people. Very interesting. Another example, I don't think I mentioned yesterday, is a very interesting story in the Gemara, which talks about how during Roman times, the Roman decrees of persecution against the Jews became very difficult, and the Jewish community wanted to placate the Roman ruler in order to mitigate these decrees. So they chose Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai as the representative to go intercede on behalf of the Jewish community. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai went on the way to Rome in order to intervene on behalf of the Jewish people and nullify these decrees against the Jews. And the Gemara says that as he was on his way, he was greeted by a demon. And this demon said that he was sent by God to aid Rabbi Shimon on his journey, on his mission. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai started to cry when the demon was upset, offended. Why are you crying? What did I do wrong? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said that the maidservant of our father merited seeing angels, which came to her aid. And I, acting on behalf of the Jewish people, merit only to see a demon. He's referring to the fact that Hagar, the maidservant of Avram, saw the angel, which directed her towards the water source to sustain herself and her son. Yet the Jewish people, when they sent Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai as an emissary to sustain them, he was only given the aid of this demon. The demon's name in the Gemara there is Talman Leon. And the demon says, look, more or less, to paraphrase, this is what you got, take it or leave it. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, okay, I'll take it. The Gemara says they went together until they got to the city gates. And there, Talman Leon said, listen, here's the plan. You go into the city gates and try and gain audience with the emperor. In the meantime, I'm going to jump the fence and hop into the palace and possess the king's daughter. Now, once you come into the king's palace, try and turn the conversation to his daughter when the king mentions she's been possessed. You offer your aid. We'll go into the room, and when you tell me I'll leave. And in the merit of the exorcism, the king will grant your wish. So that's what happened. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai finally gained audience to the king. In the meantime, this demon had possessed the king's daughter. She was frothing at the mouth. When the rabbi came in, the conversation to the king's daughter arose, and the king invited the rabbi in, and he said, Talmon, leave. Talmon, leave. At that point, the demon leaped out of the princess's body, and out of gratitude for this exorcism, the king granted Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai anything that he wished. So I think the Gemara says there that he let Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai go into the coffers, which were laden with gold and silver and wealth, and he found there the canister containing the writ, the decree against the Jewish people, and he ripped it up. I believe that's the end of the story. But in any case, you see here an example of a demon that was actually sent to be of help to the Jewish people. Similar to what we spoke yesterday regarding the scholar demons. So there are helpful types of demons as well. That being said, of course, there are many negative demons, and we mentioned that one of the reasons why there is this animosity between demons and humans is because the demons envy the fact that the human mission was embodied in the physical world, which would help them, proceed towards perfection. Whereas the demons were left kind of undone, as we said, in that twilight zone. And as a result of that, they tend to harm people and so forth and so on. And there's no lack of examples of that. We mentioned a little bit yesterday how the claustrophobic feeling that people feel in Torah lectures, or the wearing out of the clothing of the Torah scholars, is because the demons are present there trying to draw out the Torah energy. And the scholars are particularly susceptible to this, and that's why their clothing runs out earlier. Even though the demons are not entirely physical, we saw they're somewhat physical, and the rubbing against. There is another story about a demon that had possessed a shul, and one of the rabbis of the Talmud came to town, and they thought this would be an opportunity to use the rabbi to nullify the demon. So they spread the word the rabbi was in town, and nobody was to give the rabbi hospitality, with the intention that the rabbi would take up lodging in the shul overnight, which he did. And the Gemara discusses how he confronted the demon who had possessed the shul and was tyrannizing and oppressing the community. But the rabbi was able to neutralize this demon. A demon, I think, which had I think it had 7 heads. And each time the rabbi bowed in prayer, another of the heads was decapitated, until finally he nullified the demon. Afterwards, it became known to him that the community had actually put him in this position for that purpose, and he was a bit upset that they had taken advantage of him like this. But in any case, it would be another example of a negative demon. And there are many, many such stories. But we find, in general, that the demons could be used for either for good or for bad. There's a famous story too, of course, about Ashmedai. Somebody had mentioned yesterday. Ashmedai is the name that Gemara uses to refer to the king of demons. The king of demons, and there's a famous story, I believe the Gemara in Gittin, if not mistaken, that Shlomo Melech was told to build the Beis Hamikdash. But we know from Torah verses that the stones of the Beis Hamikdash could not be hewn with metal objects. Metal, which is used to take life, should not be used to hew out the stones of the building, which is the building of life. And therefore, the stones were cut with a special type of a worm called the shamir worm. And this shamir worm would be drawn across the surface of the rock and the stone and the gem and anything like that needed to be cut in the Beis Hamikdash, and somehow they're going across the surface, cut into it. And therefore, according to this, all of the stones of the Beis Hamikdash, whether the building stones of the building or even the stones of the breastplate, were cut and carved through the use of this shamir worm. The problem is Shlomo Melech didn't know how to get it. So he consulted his advisors, and his trusted advisor, Benayahu ben Yehoyada, said that he would procure this worm for the king. You familiar with the story?
No?
What he did was he went to consult with Ashmedoi, the king demon, about how to get this worm. So what he did was he went to the place where Ashmedoi was located, and the demon had a cistern of water which it would drink from, and the cistern was covered with a seal. And in this way, the demon was able to tell whether anybody had tampered with his water, because he wanted to drink only very, very pure, pristine water. So what Benayahu ben Yehoyada did was he dug a cistern downhill from this cistern, connected with a tunnel, so that the water in the cistern ran out and filled the cistern downhill. And then he covered it up. Then he dug another cistern uphill and connected them and poured wine in, so that wine filled the cistern where water was. When Ashmedoi came at the end of his day's exploits, he wanted to drink, whatever all this means. He found the cistern was properly covered and properly sealed, so he opened it up and found that there was nothing in it but wine and not water. Being very thirsty, it drank the wine instead of the water and became drunk and slept. And as the demon was sleeping, the Gemara says, Benayahu ben Yehoyada took shackles upon which were engraved the name of God and placed them on Ashmedoi, so that when it woke up, its power was nullified, negated, because of the name of God that was upon it. And I believe what the Gemara says is that Benayahu ben Yehoyada took Ashmedoi back to the palace of King Solomon. And there they asked him where they could find this shamir worm, which they need to build the Beis Hamikdash. And he said that it's located where the bird of the sea dwells. So there's a special bird of the sea that lived in some mountainous area. And Benayahu ben Yehoyada, the trusted advisor of King Solomon, then went there to get it. Now, what happened is that this bird was seen tending to its young, going and bringing food to the young and it would eat. So Ben Yehoyada, what he did was he hid in the trees, and when the bird went away, he covered the young with a box of glass, so that when the bird returned to feed its young, it could see the children, but it couldn't get through. So it flew away and brought some of these shamir worms and dropped them onto the glass container, and the shamir worms cut through the glass so that the bird could get to its young. In the meantime, Benayahu ben Yehoyada jumped out of the bushes, collected these worms, and then went back to Yerushalayim. And in this way, the shamir worm was attained through the auspices of Ashmedoi for the purpose of building the Beis Hamikdash. So you see a very interesting idea that, again, demons can be used for positive purposes if they're harnessed properly. However, here there was a problem, because when Benayahu ben Yehoyada was away, again, he had these clever kind of exploits in which he was able to, on the one hand, shackle Ashmedoi and also get the shamir worm. I think, by the way, this bird of the sea, who was appointed as the overseer of the shamir worm, when Ben Yehoyada took the worms out of its possession, it killed itself. In any case, while the advisor was away on these exploits, King Solomon was interested in learning a little bit from the demon. King Solomon was the wisest of men, and he was interested in learning from everyone and from everything. So he sought the knowledge of Ashmedoi, and Ashmedoi wouldn't speak to him. I don't remember exactly the details, but there were a few things that happened there. The demon stacked stones and then unstacked them. I don't remember exactly the details of some of the things that were going on there. But ultimately what happened is that the demon said, listen, if you want me to talk, you got to take these shackles off. There's no way to have a conversation. So King Solomon was intoxicated by the possibility of gaining knowledge from the king of the demons, and he therefore was caught off his guard and unshackled Ashmedoi. At that point, Ashmedoi, the Gemara says, kicked King Solomon out of the kingdom. 400 parsa, he was exiled. And Ashmedai posed as King Solomon in his stead. So there was actually a period of time when Ashmedai, the king of the demons, was actually reigning over Yerushalayim in place of King Solomon, together with all the different countries that King Solomon reigned over. It's a phenomenal story. The Gemara says, in the meantime, the king of the demons was having a grand old time with all of Solomon's wives, taking advantage of the opportunity of the kings being kicked out of the palace. He usurped not only his palace but also his princesses and his wives. And the words got out that the king was acting a bit perverse, not his usual self. And finally, the women consulted this Ben Yehoyada, his trusted advisor, and he realized that something was wrong here. And he said, "Tell me, do you ever see his feet?" And they say, "Well, no, it's been some time now that he actually never removes his socks, even in private quarters." So that set off a red light for them. He said, "Do what you can to take a look at the feet." They saw that the feet were like chicken legs, and he realized that this was actually a demon and not King Solomon. And I don't remember exactly what happened at that point, other than the fact that this was all catalyzed of the fact that King Solomon was trying to initiate intimacy with his mother, Bathsheba. And that's when they realized things had gotten too far. The Gemara there ultimately has two different opinions as to whether King Solomon ever returned from exile, or he remained in exile for the rest of his life, became deranged and like an outcast, wandering from place to place. There are two different versions in the Gemara. According to the one, they ousted Ashmedai and King Solomon returned. According to another opinion, if I remember correctly, King Solomon never returned. He was like a wandering madman for the rest of his life. Crazy, crazy story. Obviously, it means a lot more than just the simple story sounds like. But in any case, the point here is just that there's just one of another, of many, many stories which talk about the interaction between demons and humans, and on the one hand they can be helpful if they're harnessed properly, but they can also be very harmful if they're not, and one has to be on his guard. So let's try and finish off this little section before we break today. We're up to page 174. There's many, many things, of course, more to say about demons, but this is just an overview. Ein lecha davar ba'olam. There's nothing in the world. On page 174, second paragraph. Ein lecha davar ba'olam atachton. There's nothing in the lower physical world. Ben etzem ben mikre, whether it is an object or an event. Shelo yimatze kenegdo inyan ma, that there will not be parallel to it some matter lamala bekochos and avdolim, in the spiritual realm of forces. V'chen ein lecha davar lamata shelo hi elav mamunim mikas amalachim, nor do you have anything in the lower world of physical creation which is not supervised by some class of angels. Shemanhigim also umechadshim bo inyanim umikrim, which guide them and which bring about new types of scenarios and events, as is decreed by God. And the effect that the upper spiritual realm has on the lower physical realm is what we refer to as hashpa'ah. Hashpa'ah, the word shefa comes from that. So basically what he's saying is, not only is there a physical creation and a spiritual creation, but they actually parallel each other. And that everything in the physical world has some counterpart in the spiritual world. This would be associated with the kochos that we were speaking about earlier, the forces of creation which are directed through the hierarchy of the spiritual realm, which have a general effect on the running of the world. And it's also related to angels. Angels having a specific effect, the ability to affect in a specific way certain aspects of creation. So they're not entirely separate. Kol ha'ashpa'os ha'ba'os min ha'elyonim letzorach tachtonim ovros derech ha'kochavim. All of the influences which come from the upper realm for the purpose of the lower realm they pass through the venue of the stars and the planets, the luminaries, and the heavenly bodies. And therefore it turns out that the stars, the planets, the constellations are actually positioned in a way which makes them more closely associated with what happens in the physical world. Okay? And this system that he's describing here is what we call mazel. And mazel is not luck. Mazel is the influence of God which is directed into the physical world through the heavenly bodies. That's mazel, right? The horoscope. That's more like we're talking about. And mazel actually comes from the Hebrew word nozel, where nozel means to flow. Right? Nozel is to flow. So it's referring to the divine flow of influence from the spiritual realm into the physical realm, originate at the highest part of the physical realm, which is the heavenly bodies in outer space. Right? So that when the ancients worshipped the stars, they did so because they perceived some divine energy radiating from those illuminating bodies. The problem was they thought that the energy they perceived coming from those heavenly bodies was particular to the body itself, and therefore they came to deify the constellations, as opposed to seeing them as venues through which the divine influence is spread into the world. And that's the source for idolatry. But their influence is only a function of what is sent to them from on high. So he's clarifying that there's no independent source of influence on behalf of these heavenly bodies into the world at all. Right? They're only portals through which the divine energy is emitted into the world. The names of the planets, of course, are associated, the names of the planet in other languages are associated with idolatry. Mars, the god of war, right? Jupiter and Venus, the goddess of love. And what else is there? Saturn. And what else is there? Saturn, Mercury, right? The god of Mercury, right? Mars, Venus, right? In fact, the days of the week are also associated with idolatry. Monday is the day of the moon. Well, Sunday the day of the sun. Monday the day of the moon. Tuesday is the day of Tu. Tu is the Norse god corresponding to, I don't know, how do you say Tuesday in French? Merdes, no? Merde. Yeah, that's Mars Day. Yeah, and Wednesday? Mercury Day. It's Mercury's Day. Right? And then Thursday, of course, is Thor's Day.
French?
No. Thursday is the day of Thor. Thor is the god of weather. And in French or the Latin language, it's something like Jupiter's Day, right? Jueves or Jeudi. That's Jupiter's Day. Yeah? Jueves, Jupiter. Yeah, it's Jupiter's Day. And then Friday is Frigga's Day, or Vernus, which is Venus's Day, right? And then you're back to Saturn. That's Saturday is Saturn's Day. So that the days of the week are actually named after the gods of the stars, and that's based on the belief, which is discussed in the Talmud as well, that every day is ruled at the beginning of the day by one of the planets. And in times of old, when they deified the planets, they named the day after the deity in its honor. And that's how you got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah? In Judaism, of course, that's not the case. It's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and Shabbos. Yeah? But in any case, this is a result of the non-Jews ascribing godlike qualities to the stars because of the influence that these planets have in the world, as opposed to Judaism, where we do believe in astrology, but the idea is there is an astrological influence of each star at the beginning of each day. But God forbid to deify the day or to dedicate it to the day because we deify the star. But the point is, we recognize that the divine influence is interjected into the world in a specific way on each day, according to the primary influence of the star or the planet that operates at that time. So just to finish off this section, L'chol ele haruchanim nosan odon baruch hu reshus lif'ol b'tachtonim pulon shelo kederech tivi. In all of these realms of the spiritual, God gave power to beings in the lower world to have influence over these powers in a non-physical way, in a non-natural way. By using objects, instruments, and methods in the physical world, which were set up to be able to have control over and effect over the spiritual realm. Right? So basically what he's saying is, not only is there a physical and spiritual creation, but everything in the spiritual plane parallels the physical plane. Things in the spiritual plane actually have a great effect on things in the physical plane. But it goes both ways. God also enabled and created ways in which you can actually use the physical realm to revert back and have an effect on the spiritual realm. Umnam, ein b'koach shum echad mehem lasos kol ma sheyirtzeh, but a person can't just do anything that he wants by way of affecting the spiritual realm. El kol echad yesh gvul ma sheyugba lo. Each thing has a limit to the extent to which the lower realm has an ability to affect things in the upper realm. We're talking here primarily about human beings. I don't know why he doesn't say that explicitly. But what he's talking about is that God gave humans the ability to affect things in the spiritual realm. Only within the limitations and the parameters that were given over by God to a person, only to that extent can he affect the spiritual realm. Only within those limitations can he operate on these actions which were given to him for that purpose. There are among these tools and techniques things which are permitted, and things that are prohibited. And this, for example, would be the difference between what's called the Sefer Yetzirah or Maaseh Kshafim. The Sefer Yetzirah is a book which is attributed to the teachings of Adam or of Avram. Maybe of Adam is passed down through 20 generations until it came to Avram, and then was finally written down. And in the Sefer Yetzirah are the secrets of how to tap into the spiritual realm and to unleash their forces for good. But there's a parallel ability to do that in the negative side, which is prohibition, and that would be, like he's saying here, magic and witchcraft. So that, according to the author, the forces of magic and witchcraft and wizardry and black magic and demonology, these are all things which work if you know how to do it properly. Yeah, God created the physical world in a way which would enable people to tap into the spiritual in those ways. Only he said that's prohibited. There are permitted ways of doing it. That's what must be done. Why did God create the negative venue? Right? If you can do so through a positive venue, the answer is in order to restore or to maintain free will through all of creation. Right? So in order since God wanted to give people the tools for accessing, manipulating, and even controlling the spiritual realm in a permitted way, he had to also give access in a non-permitted way. So that people would, regarding connecting to the spiritual realm, be confronted with the decision of either choosing good or bad, right or wrong, purity or impurity. And therefore, they all work. We're permitted to do so in certain ways. That would have to do with the things which are taught in the Kabbalah, but there are other ways which are prohibited. That's magic and witchcraft. Okay. Let's end here. And that finishes the section on the spiritual realm. The next section is going to be talking about the special significance of Torah and mitzvahs.